Hi, this is Santiago
Hi.
Escobar Jaramillo from Manizales, Colombia. El amor todo lo cura, which stands for Love is all crazy, love heals everything, is the name of the 13th version of FICMA, Manizales International Film Fair, organized by Federico Zapata and Diana Castellanos, which seeks to poetize and analyze the meaning of our fragility and explore the cracks of humanity that defines us from our infinite perspectives in these turbulent times and in transit. And to celebrate this, we have Master Roger Ballen, acclaimed New Yorker photographer who lives in South Africa with almost 50 years of artistic trajectory. We are very glad, we are very pleased to have My Mind is a Clash, a series exhibited at Kumandai Hall, and your films projected at the Fundadores Theater in our city. Welcome to Manizales, Roger.
Good day. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
So, it is your first exhibition in Colombia. I remember to read recently that you were planning to exhibit in Bogota in 2020. And yeah,
Yeah, it was my first exhibition. I was very sorry that I haven't been able to visit Colombia because I had that exhibition and I think one a number of years before that, but it just didn't happen. I guess it's a long trip to go from Johannesburg to Bogota and it didn't happen, but hopefully someday soon I'll come and visit.
okay. But we are so pleased to have your uh, work here exhibited. I think it's the first time that people from Manizales can be close to your work and to relate to it. So I'm so happy so we can talk different aspects of this through this journey. Um, I remember that in 2016 you had a massive exhibition in Fotomuseo Cuatro Caminos in Mexico City, directed by my beloved friend Lupita Lara. While you visit Mexico City or other Latin American cities, do you find any similarities to Johannesburg and other outlets? I must say that you ought to be interested in photographing around.
Well, look, every city is unique in some way or another. I mean, Rio has mountains and sea, and Sao Paulo is more flat, and Santiago might have some other history to it. So on one hand, they're all somewhat different. On the other hand, the people have a similar heritage. The Spanish heritage speak Spanish. There's a lot of similar religious practices. So there are some similarities. It's just like if you went to America and went from state to state, every place is a little different, but there is some similar ethnic culture running from state to state and even in Europe. But so I'd be hesitant to say that there's more similarities than differences, and I'd be hesitant to say there are more differences than similarities. I've been to most of the countries, but I'm not as expert. I haven't been everywhere in South America.
And had you produced any work in South America, like
Yes,
any photographic projects?
my first visit to South America, if we want to include Central America and Mexico, was in 1969. When I was 19 years old, I studied at University of California, Berkeley. And during that summer, I drove to Oaxaca. And this was my first experience in Central America, Latin America in 1969. And this was a very important experience in my life. And I actually took some very interesting photographs then in 69. And after that, in 1979 and 1980, I went to Guatemala and also spent a couple of weeks there taking photographs. And so those were the first experiences in so-called Latin America, Central America. Then I guess my first real trip to Latin America, I think came, I can't remember the exact date. I think it was about 2012 when I went to Buenos Aires and Sao Paulo and I had exhibitions there. So that was in 2012.
That's cool. That's so cool to know. I will share some of the images if you don't mind, because I'm very interested to have a look on some of the projects that you have been doing. And your aim has been always uh, has always been the same, to question the meaning of human existence, to and the people living in the margin of society. Therefore,
Well,
I find there. Say it again. Therefore, I find that there is compassion on your photographs and videos, uh, because you are not afraid to show the different ones, or the peripherics, or some other call them the insane, the outcasts. What do you think important to put uh, the to to put this on question? Why it is important to talk about those who haven't been um, photographed or studied, or people being interested in?
well, look, you're bringing up a few important points. Up to 2002, nearly all my pictures, in a way, were portraiture. And this was quite clear in the Outland project, in the Platelum project, and early Shadow Chamber. But beginning in about 2002, portraiture disappeared from the work, and this was replaced by drawings, a lot of animals, installations, and other things. So when one thinks about my work or looks at my work, one has to sort of think to come to the conclusion, well, what's Balinese? What's Roger Ballin about? And part of it was photographing people on the margin, as you say, and but also there's a psychodramas taking place. There's psychodramas taking place. There's dramas of the absurd, theater of the absurd. This is when one refers to the work now, one says it's Balinese. So what do we mean by Balinese? We mean maybe something that includes drawings, installations, animals, parts of people. It's almost like an ongoing theater that is taking place. It's not necessarily about one locale in the world or another locale in the world. It's really about a theater of the mind. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at a theater of the mind. So wherever you show these photographs, people don't necessarily have to know very much about where they were taken or how they were taken. They relate to sort of an archetypal vision of the world that most people subconsciously or consciously can come to be aware of in one way or another. And the pictures do have an uncanny ability, which is an important word, uncanny ability to lodge themselves in people's consciousness and not necessarily disappear very quickly.
Yeah. In Asylum of the Birds, you're very well celebrated documentary, and massively shared on Facebook in 2014. You claim that when you create photographs, you often travel deep into your own interior, place with dreams where many of the images are originated. You see your photographs as mirrors, reflections, connectors that challenge the mind. Does it mean that photography, or to photograph others, mostly reflect on you, on your state of mind, on what you are trying to look for?
Yeah, well, they definitely, these are transformed realities. They're not necessarily documentary realities. They're so-called Balinese realities. So what I see is transformed through my mind and then captured by the camera and then put on a wall and other people see them. And if other people react to them in a strong way, or they remember what they see, then it's about their mind as well as my mind. Because if you're attracted to something or it has impact on you in one way or another, then it has to have something to do with you as well. And that's the ideal situation where the pictures are transformed through my mind, through the camera. They have an uncanny ability to perhaps have impact on me. I'm proud of what I do. I feel confident that I've been able to say something with my photograph that I've been wanting to say, and at the same time, they have impact on the others. And I've always stated, which is a very important point, that if you can describe my pictures in words other than strange, enigmatic, chaotic in some way or another, if you can describe it in words, in simplistic words, then it's probably a bad photograph. So my pictures aren't easily put into words, and you can't say my pictures are about this. You can't say my pictures are about that. Sometimes the pictures have opposites. Sometimes there are opposites in the photograph. And what is the word for opposite in English? When something offers you opposite viewpoints. Well, in English, there's no proper word for this. And you see this all the time in my pictures. They're very hard to describe.
There is, as you said, labyrinths of the mind and of the subconsciousness. Somehow, when you reflect on the mirror, you don't know if that's the person or that is imprinted there, or is the one that is in here. Somehow, it is a confusion about, as you said, about reality, and you are not interested in understanding reality as a fact, but as an illusion. Yes?
You're absolutely correct. I mean, reality is an illusion. It's an illusion. There's no way of properly describing and understanding reality. It's a totally subjective viewpoint. There's nothing objective about saying this is real. And then when you ask the question, what do you mean by real? Then you run out of words. You don't know what to say. So what you see here is a Roger Vallon reality. That's what you see here. It's not objective reality. It's a Roger Vallon transformed reality, which ultimately usually, well, in most cases, has a psychological meaning and a psychological impact.
I also have the impression that craziness is determined by others. Somehow madness or insanity needs another person or viewer to nominate it. For someone who is living his or her own reality, as we can see in the pictures and videos, it can be understood also as freedom and enlightenment. Somehow, it has this possibility for the people or main characters within the photos to express themselves as how they wish, as how they feel. And I really find that fascinating about your work is that, as I said at the beginning, I found compassion on it, because we are not looking at them as freaky persons or unadapted person, but a person that's their life and that's how they behave or are part of the world. What do you think about that? How do you can express that?
The thing is, you can't take pictures like mine if you don't like the subjects. If you don't like being in places like this. You don't interact with people like this. So if I didn't have the empathy, and I didn't have the empathy for the people I work with, and the people didn't believe in my empathy. This is an important point, because the people can see if you really care for them, whether you're really interested in them or you're just doing it for yourself. And many of the people that I photographed in various places over the years stay in contact with me. Some people I've known for like 30 years, and some of my best friends are the people I photographed, and I hear from them every day. I hear, all day long from people. When are you coming, Roger? How are you? Oh, my child's sick. I don't have any food. Come and visit me. So yeah, this is a two-way interaction. And it's very important for people to understand that it's just not like me going into a place with the expensive camera, taking pictures and walking out. You can't do that. You can't do that in this type of work, because these projects most of them take about 5 years. And you see the Shadow Chamber building here. I mean, the Asylum of the Birds building here. Well, had to go into this place for 5 years, So if the people don't like me or they feel that I'm a phony or I'm taking advantage of them, I'd probably be killed. I probably would be killed, or at least my camera stolen. But so it's a two-way, as they say in English, a two-way street. Both parties have to be happy with each other.
Yeah, and to me, it has been always a curiosity to know how do you work with them? If you feel that this is a collaborative project, or this is rather yours as an author, and they are just subjects who are photographed.
No, look, it's collaborative in the sense there's I'm there and they're being photographed, but the pictures are more than just a person standing there, sitting there. They're about the walls, they're about the objects, they're about the animals. It's a complex viewpoint. So it's not just about the people, it's about other things other than the people, especially after 2002. So what do we say about the birds in the Asylum of the Birds? I mean, what about the goose here? Is the goose feeling positive to Roger? I mean, it's more about the goose than anything else. And so one has to be very cautious when one looks at my pictures, not to only talk about the human subjects. The human subjects are an important part of my pictures, important part of my career, but there's many, many other things in my photograph that have nothing really to do with my subjects. What about the drawings? Where did the chain come from? What about the wires on the wall? What about the rats? So, nobody ever asked me, well, what do the rats think? What do the rats think?
Yes, I had that question, but later, because I want to
like me.
because I want to talk about Roger the Rat later. So you can tell us a little bit more about this project. I wanted to stay in this presentation to see something about how you portray masks as objects. Other times, the masks are drawings. Somehow there is a relation between what is functional or material and or three-dimensional, if you like, and what is draw in the wall. Like I'm very curious to know how do you jump from one to the other and use these similar expressions, and are these masks synonyms of different personalities or are used to hide or fold something?
Okay, well, the first thing is beginning at about 2002 again, I decided not to do portraiture anymore, because when a person looks at my photographs, the first thing that they think about and the first thing that they use to understand the picture is the person's face. It's natural. When you see somebody for the first time, you look at their face and try to understand what they're about. And so I felt that there were many other important aspects in my photographs that I wanted to stress and bring to the forefront. And therefore, I started to omit portraiture, omit the person's face in many cases. And so then you have to start to look at the other aspects of the work, as I've mentioned, whether it's the drawings in the background, whether it's the marks on the wall, whether they be animals or bits and pieces of human hands. And this becomes more of a challenge for the viewer to come to terms with the meaning of the work, because they can't just look at the person and say, oh, she's this, or he's poor, he's rich, he's this or that. It's no longer so simple to do that. And so, yeah, so for example, here on this one picture, there's a mask. There's a mask of a boy with a bird in his mask, but you can't really talk about the boy because it's a mask. You can't say, well, this person's old, he's new, he's poor, he's rich, he's black, or this white, or whatever he is. You now relating to this mask, which it creates another set of a cultural meaning. So I want the pictures to have not be in a situation where people can't judge them by socioeconomics, by culture, by race, by gender. I want all that to disappear, and I want to create an archetypal photograph that goes beyond the person in the picture.
I found very theatrical to think about the mise-en-scenes that you are creating. You say sometimes that you find your work or the compositions very formal and simple, but I rather find them very complex and full of dynamics within. I want to know, how do you get to this point while you are working or participating or collaborating with the subjects? Are you expecting chaos to happen? Do you find error or mistakes as a really important part of your work? Or you are more like controlling everything? How do you feel about it?
And look, first of all, before I take a picture, when I go to, say, the asylum or the bird's house, I don't think of anything. I have no plans. And sometimes it starts with one idea when I get there, and then work on that idea. Sometimes I move something there. Sometimes it's there already. Sometimes something else happens. Sometimes it takes 100, 200, 1,000 different decisions. I always say that my pictures are like a painting. If you look at a painting, it has thousands of brushstrokes. Well, if you look at my pictures, usually there could be thousands of decisions to get there. Not just, oh, go walk into the building. Oh, look, snap, 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 I got it. It never works that way. It's layer on layer on layer on layer. So you have to make sure that before you take the picture that there's a complexity in the image. And whether that takes me making a drawing or moving something around or just not even taking the picture because it's not there, well, then that's fine. So, it's a multi-dimensional creative process that's just never the same from one day to the next. Every day it's different. Every day the picture comes in different ways. And sometimes I capture it in a very powerful way, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So there's no formula for doing this, absolutely zero formula. That creativity you can't create a formula around creativity. Otherwise the work is contrived and unauthentic. And that's what we find in most photography these days. It's all about the same it's all about the same message. It looks fake. It looks like something we've seen before. It's all about the same meaning. And therefore it doesn't have any, ultimately, most of it that has no impact because we know all about it already. My job is to take you to the zone of my job is to take you to the back of your mind. That's my job.
And as you said, as it flows, like creativity should flow. I remember when I was studying in London, and I went to a conference of a French philosopher, Jean-Luc. I forgot the second name, but he talked about the line, how the line has to flow and to become whatever the line or the drawing wants to be. And for example, in these two images, you can see these multiple membranes, the drawing of a line of a charcoal, but also you have a tangled wire. And I find this fascinating because you have the composition that is always running, like it passed from being an object to being a painting. It gives dimension to the subjects, to what is with the frame. Why it is so important for you, the line and the drawing? Because
look, I worked, I guess it was, say, for 30 years. Well, let's go back again. In 1973, I spent about 4 or 5 months obsessed with painting. I made one painting after the next in 1973. And during the next 30 years, here and there, I I found people were during the next, say, 30 years, I visited many houses where people would draw on the walls or there's graffiti inside the house. And on occasion, I would try to link what was on the wall with the human subject. And this went on for many, many years. And beginning at about 2000 or so, I started to, my aesthetic started to shift dramatically in the sense that I started to integrate drawing, installation making with my subjects, with the human subjects, and later on with the animal subjects. And so it really took nearly 30 years, maybe even longer than 30 years, for me to be able to develop the technique and the aesthetic to link drawing with the rest of the part of the picture. So it wasn't just a simple process. It occurred very, very gradually, and I started to develop a confidence and a way of using pictures, drawings inside the picture. So I always ask students, for example, I say, well, here's some chalk, draw on the wall, make a drawing, go ahead. But what do they come up with? They don't know what to do next. So it's not so easy just to be able to integrate drawing and painting with the rest of the photograph. I mean, it has to be coherent, it has to feel real and authentic. So how do you do this? Well, it took me 35, 40 years to get there. That's all I can say. Not so simple. Not so simple. I apologize for something right now. I don't know if you have the same problem in Colombia, but in South Africa, there's endless power blackouts, power shortage. Yeah. So the power went off in the room. My computer works off a battery right now, but so the light changed. I put on some LED lights that run off a battery, so you can see the lights change in the background because there's no power in the building right now.
You look amazing there.
I look like a ghost now.
As you said, creativity, when it needs to happen, it is happening. So yes, and I wanted to talk about drawing and sculpture and video because you are always experimenting from one to the other side. You use these different tools to express yourself, and I like that because you are not afraid of experimenting. And for example, this short film, Roger the Rat, it is really interesting because somehow it talks about sorry, in the film you see the rat. You say that is you, Roger, trying to relate, play, dance, have dinner with these female mannequins without any response. Is this a metaphor of the impossibility of people to relate to each other, to accept the different one? And as this film happened during the pandemic, you film it while during the pandemic, is that a way to metaphorize about this difficulty to relate to each other?
Look, all my work doesn't have one metaphor. There are multiple metaphors in here, and many of the metaphors aren't easily explainable in words. So one could say this is about people's inability to relate to each other. It also could say something about humanity itself, that humanity is fundamentally violent and isolated. It could say something about the human condition, that the human condition is never satisfied and is always in a state of turmoil. So we can analyze this film and end my work in many, many ways, and create many, many metaphors. And as I said earlier, I would like to say that my work has multiple metaphors, which are fundamentally visual in nature. So there are a lot of things we could talk about these films forever and ever, but something that's always missing is the visual dynamic, which you can't explain.
And so let's talk of something that we can see repeatedly in the video, that is the rat. And you just said that no one asked you about why you use rats as subjects and characters in your films and photographs. In this case, there is a living rats and also this cartoon, if you like.
Well, the thing is the rat is one, I don't know about in Colombia, but in the Western world, people hate rats. Rat is seen as something evil that brings disease, something that represents chaos. And so people are very scared of rats. And so the rat is like the outsider animal. The rat's like some of the people I work with. They live on the outside. People don't like them. They sit on the edge, and people are threatened by their very existence. And so the rat, in a way, in a more metaphoric way, represents the repressed mind. It's the part of the mind that people don't want to come into contact. And the rat is an animal that people don't want to come into contact in the Western world. I'm not talking about Africa right now, in the Western world. So the rat represents repression in so many ways in humanity. But I've always said, and I'll say again, the rat is, for size of the brain, is probably the most intelligent animal on the planet. And the rat is another animal. It's what it is. The rat's another animal. The rat's no different than a dog, a cat, an elephant, a giraffe, and ultimately a human being. It's another species on the planet. So there's nothing wrong with rats. There's something wrong with humanity. That's the problem.
So it is a critic to ourselves as society and humanity, you want to say?
No, there's nothing wrong with the rat. The people hate rats, as I told you, because they somehow or another represent their state of their repressed mind.
And you are also experimenting with sound. I want to play this video about the theater of apparitions that was you were invited to Venice Biennale with other two artists from South Africa. And here I see a different aspects of it. And I like the idea of sound, of these trumpets that are surrounding the scenery. And I also find these drawings, I'm not sure if are based on the Altamira Caves paintings and the Paleolithic art are like construct from a stone, are looks like doodles. What did you wanted to show with this new project? That is your most recent one.
Well, this is called Theater of Apparitions. It was a book published by Thames and Hudson. So what was the purpose of this book? Or what was the purpose of these images for me in some ways or another? So if you asked yourself, take a picture of what you'll be after you die, what would you do? How would you make something that's invisible? Because where are we going? How would you make something invisible visible in a photograph? So that was the challenge. So basically, an apparition in English is a ghost. It's something that exists after life. It's a spirit, it's a ghost, it's something that was alive once, but is no longer living on this planet. It's in the air, it's spooky, it's something you can't touch. And so in a way, the purpose was to make images of the spirit world, of the after-death world. So that was the purpose of Theater of Apparitions.
It's very interesting. And it was the first time that you use backlight to show your images? Like
these were done in light boxes. So this was
light boxes, yeah.
These are all double-sided light boxes. So this was a very important show to me, and it worked out very well. And the Theater of Apparitions they were perfect images for light boxes, absolutely perfect images.
Mm-hmm. I found a similarity with your previous work, No Joke, in the sense that you are focused on the body, especially, and body with no faces or with no identity. How do you relate one work to the other? How inspiration from your previous work comes together in the next one?
Well, again, I always say if you're not inspired by your own work, you're in trouble. So when you start a project, you come up with some idea and you begin to make some photographs, and then you learn from your photographs. Your photographs take you inside, and then you build on what you've done. So you learn from doing. There's no simple way of taking good photographs or learning what or progressing without working. Taking the pictures is the key to success in this business. You can go to every museum in the world, read every book, but in the end of the day, the hard part is going and taking the pictures and getting the images.
How to advance yourself as an artist when you have done so much? You have been almost 50 years photographing and doing projects. How to keep your own identity, your own touch, but how you change your possibilities, how you present new artwork that the public and of course you find overwhelming or find like inspirational.
Well, look, again, there's no way other than going and taking the pictures. And if you're focused, you're disciplined, and you have I don't know, if you're motivated and you have a creative mind, well, you'll keep finding things. You keep finding things all the time, and then you build on what you find. But if you think it's going to just happen in the middle of the night, or just walking from one place to the next, it won't. It comes through going and taking the pictures. And so for the last 4 years, for example, I've only done color works. So 50 years of black and white, and 4 years now of color photography. And so every day, 5 days a week, I go and take photographs, and through taking the pictures, I create new visions. I go into other places that I never was in before. And so on one hand, you can say, "Oh, this looks like a Roger Bellin picture," but on the other hand, it's unique in itself. It's unique in itself. So I just keep creating. Because I'm focused. I believe in what I'm doing. I have 54 years of taking pictures. I'm able to continually create new visual realities. And this is, I think, very important. I always try to make the analogy, and maybe people can understand it this way. You never have the same dream twice, do you? You never have the same dream twice. So there's an unlimited possibilities out there. The problem is to manifest them. The problem is manifesting them. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's a hard process. It's a very complicated process. And as I get older and older, I have to become very focused. I have to become very fussy, if you use the word. I have to keep a certain standard. I can't lower my standard. Let's put it that way.
Do you often think about your legacy? What is your reaction to other works that look similar or are inspired by yours? It comes to my mind, Colombian photographer Andres Sierra, and in a different level.
I'm very happy when people copy me, because that means that I had influence on them. So that's fine. And nobody can create this. I can't become Picasso. I can't become Van Gogh. I can't become a Michelangelo. It's impossible. As I told you, there's thousands of steps to make these pictures. And where I go right, somebody will go left. And where they go left, I'll go right. And before long, they're not the same pictures. They're little bits and pieces in the picture that maybe have something to do with what I did. But you can't work. It's impossible.
Yeah, but it not necessarily is about copying you, but getting inspired by you. I remember last week, Santiago Sierra, the Spanish artist who collaborated with Kanye West for Balenciaga fashion show in Paris, and all the place was filled with mood. And to me as a photographer, as an artist, I can make these parallels and recreation. It doesn't matter that Santiago Sierra is copying you in the sense, but somehow you are in our mind. Your aesthetics is part of our history, And every time we see these compositions, these uh, different ideas, you always connect them.
Hmm. Well, this is great. I couldn't be more pleased if this is the situation, because that means the pictures had impact and have longevity. And so what could be better? What could be better? This is, as an artist, this is what you would hope, that the pictures have longevity to them, that they can influence people from one country to the next, from one culture to the next over time. And well, this is what you would want to achieve by all means.
That's great to know. And I Melomaniacs will not forgive me if I don't ask you about I Think You Freaky by Die Antwoord. The music video has more than 178 million reproductions on YouTube. And yeah, became what is the behind the scenes of this video? They came to you and asked you to make a project, or you heard the music and wanted to
No, and
collaborate with them?
for many years, they lived in Cape Town. I live in Johannesburg. So in 2005 or 6, they sent me messages and they said, we saw your work. They called me Mr. Vallon. We saw your work, Mr. Vallon. And after we saw your work, we stopped doing what we did before. And after the next year, we created the artwork. So they see me as the father of their aesthetic. I was the inspiration behind the artwork. And so they started to integrate my aesthetic in they initial videos, and it just went crazy. I mean, nobody expected it to happen. They nor me ever expected that, they would become so internationally well known. And I guess it was this integration between their performance and my aesthetic that created something totally unique, totally different, and that people could identify with on all different levels from culture to culture. So this, I guess, relationship in so many ways culminated in I Think You're Freaky. And it's became one of the most important videos, I guess, of the last couple decades, and one of the most unique videos. When you look at this video, it's not like anything else you ever saw before. It's not about kissy, kissy, lovey, lovey, violence, kissy up, make up. It's not about the same stuff that 99% of these videos are made of. It's not romantic. It's not unromantic. It's about some other world in a way. It's about another space and time that's related to my vision and their performance. And so, this video had a big impact on my career because, well, millions of young people especially saw this video and became interested in what I was doing as an artist photographer.
Such an amazing video. And you not only directed it, and we already talked about the impact that it has had in society, but you also published a book of it. Why are you interested in publishing your work in photo books or in books of photography? Do you prefer to have an exhibition or rather have a photo book?
Look,
How do you?
for me, I come from another generation, the generation where the photo book was very important, and that people, a book has longevity to it. A show is a month, 2 months with a few articles that maybe I can't even understand because it's in another language, and then it's over. But a book is a permanent object. It's a permanent object. About something that I was involved in for many years. And so a book is the height of what I do in so many ways. It's a culmination of years and years of work. And so the book is a very valuable part of a very valuable object, a very valuable goal in my career. That's what I strive for. I strive to work on projects and then make books out of them. And I've done about 28 books up to now, something like 28 books.
28 books? Wow.
What
And
else?
how do you edit your work? Do you work with editors, or do you have a collaborator, an assistant,
Well,
or by yourself?
Usually it's me doing it because I know the work better than anybody. So it's usually me working on the, editing, choosing the images, putting them together. And sometimes I've worked with some very good editors over the years, and sometimes they don't. They want me to do everything, and sometimes I work in coordination with an editor to create, to sort of integrate their ideas with my ideas. And so I sometimes I can't say, each situation is different.
I stopped hearing you. Sorry.
Oh, I
Mr.
just want
Roger.
want that leader can go. Yeah. I just told somebody who works for me that they can leave now.
Okay, so the last question, Roger, we know that you are very busy and that you have another interview. Do you have hope in humanity?
Do I have, excuse me, what did you say?
Do you have hope on humanity?
I don't want to use the word hope. It's a bad word. What do we mean by hope? Do we mean that everybody will be driving a Maserati? Do we mean that everybody's going to heaven? Do we mean that there'll be peace on earth? Do we mean that everybody will be satisfied with consuming? Do we mean that everybody's happy? But how do we measure happiness? I think hope is an illusionary word. Hope is a word that actually lacks meaning. I think I think we can look at it personally. We all hope that we all have good health. We all hope that we feel positive. We hope that people we love stay healthy and happy. But that is all we can do. When we talk about humanity, you can't judge the future. We just can't judge the future. And I don't think that humanity is going to change. I don't see any. Humanity was created out of billions and billions of years of evolution. So we're products of evolution in a way, and we're a lot of our behavior is based on the cell structures of the brain. So whether this is going to be predominant over everything else in the future, I just can't say. So I would hope that there's peace. I would hope that the nature in the world isn't totally destroyed. I would hope that people live better, that the poor live better than they do now. But I don't know. I wouldn't even want to even guess, to tell you the truth. Tomorrow's another day.
Thanks a lot, Roger, for this amazing opportunity to talk to you. Thanks also to Figma. Remember to visit My Mind is a Cage, the exhibition that will be till the 5th of November, exhibited at Kumandai Hall in the theater Los Fundadores, also accompanied by the video installations and the expanded cartographies. Thanks a lot for having us. Hope to meet you one day in person.
Oh, thank you. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your great questions, and thank you for your time. And thank Viviana and the other people that have been behind the whole project. I really appreciate the fact that you're showing my films. It's a really great honor for me, and I'm really so pleased for this. And I hope someday I can meet you and the rest of the team and put together a big show in Colombia. So thank you very much again. Take care, be healthy, be happy, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks. You're more than welcome in Manizales.
Thanks, Roger.
See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Federico and Diana,
Bye.
for putting this together. Ciao, Viviana.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.